Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, I have the wonderful privilege of bringing on a wonderful guest who had a close connection, in other words, best friends with probably undisputed queen of comedy, Lucille Ball. She joins us on the program today to share an intimate look and an in-depth profile of this wonderful comedian and movie star. And they performed together in such hits as Wildcats, which was a Broadway show where she played Lucille Ball's younger sister. She is also well known to be a real estate tycoon in California, leasing homes to famous actors like Michael Douglas, Roger Moore, the Bee Gees, Woody Allen, and others. She joins us on the Beyond 50 radio program today to share with us her book, Lucy Loved Me. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Paula Stewart. Paula, thank you for being on the program today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here talking with you.
You know, it's pretty exciting when we have guests like you on the program. People think, well, you know, Lucille Ball, that's big. I want to know everything there is to know about it. I say, you know, when you read the stories of these people who share these stories, to me, they're about as fascinating as the person you're excited to be learning about. And you had quite an extensive career, you know, especially on stage on the East Coast and Broadway and so forth, before you came across Lucille Ball's path. Tell us how this all started for you.
Well, I started out at Northwestern University and joined the traveling company, the national company of Brigadoon, and then I ended up in New York, and then then in New York I got into 17, which was a musical produced by Milton Berle, and from there on, I just was in musical comedy until finally I met Lucy.
Now, tell me how that all started for you.
Well, it's a long story, and if you read the book, it's a lot easier because it's very
It certainly
complicated.
is, especially with all the people you talk about, too. So,
well, it's a little complicated because I had auditioned for the musical that Lucy was doing in New York for the producers, and they decided that I was too much like Lucy. So Lucy was at odds with them, saying, well, look, what's wrong with this Paula Stewart? I hear so much about her because she's a big star right now on Broadway. And they said, oh, no, Lucy, she's too much like you. And she said, what? She's supposed to be my sister. I want to see her tomorrow morning. And so then I auditioned for Lucy. And then I didn't really meet Lucy until the first rehearsal. And at the first rehearsal, which is the first reading, with all the cast and the gypsies and everybody, that's when I first heard her, try to attempt to sing. And all the cast members kind of looked down and said, "Uh-oh, she can't sing." Of course, Lucy was not known for her voice, She was known for a raucous voice, but not for a singing voice. So during the break, I went over to her, and I felt her discomfort, and I hadn't really officially met her yet. So I went up to her. I didn't even know who Lucille Ball was, to tell you the truth, because I was always working at night on Broadway, and I never watched her TV show. So when I went up to her, and I said, Miss Ball, I'd like to help you with some of your songs if you'd let me. And she said, oh, my God, you're the first person who's come to help me. She threw her arms around me, and that was it. That was the beginning of a long friendship.
Now, she was quite a woman when it came to how the public perception of who Lucille Ball was. I mean, she seemed to be just as friendly and, I guess, approachable as she seemed to be as an actress and comedian. Isn't that true?
That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
Lucy was the most welcoming of her fans, and she was also very, very patient with them. She was standing there for hours signing autographs after the theater. She was an absolutely wonderful, wonderful star. I've never worked with anybody like that, and I've never had anybody like that in my life, and I miss her so much. She was so important to me. She was my mentor. She was my savior. She was my best friend, and I miss her terribly.
Now, we had the wonderful opportunity many years ago, I want to say right around 2007, as we were producing our show out of Portland, Oregon. And just so happens there's a gentleman there that works for Portland General Electric, Joe Mayer. Now, people would say, well, so what? Well, Joe Mayer was actually one of the two twins who played little Ricky Ricardo in the I Love Lucy show as the son. And what people didn't know was it was actually twins. So that way when one got tired, they'd put the other one in. You know, they were using twin boys to play one little Ricky Ricardo.
That's funny.
And it was really a lot of fun to have him and his brother Michael, I believe it was, and he called in from Los Angeles. And they were sharing this beautiful, rich history about not only the I Love Lucy show, but also Desilu Productions. So what people need to know is not only was Lucy an accomplished actress and, again, the queen of comedy, but Desilu Productions was a really big deal. So she was also a sought-after, because at the time you came to know her, she was a single woman, right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I introduced her to her ex-husband, Gary Morton. And I was maid of honor at their wedding, and we were basically newlyweds together at the same time because I was just married to Jack Carter, the comedian, and Lucy eventually married Gary. So we were kind of like a newlywed couple. We would travel around and you know, go on vacations together and go shopping, go do all kinds of things together. But as far as I know what you're getting at is, was Lucy particularly interested in running the company? No, she was not. She did not like it. Eventually, she educated Gary to be able to run the business end, and which he was not really capable of, but she gave him the chance to do it. So, but Lucy was not enamored of being an executive.
I think what I was also trying to get at, too, is the fact that here you have somebody who was a single woman who also was very powerful, so you could see where, you know, back in those days, and not that it's too different today, but certainly there's a lot more in place that protect people, but that she was sought after, not necessarily for all the right reasons when it comes to relationships.
That's true. A lot of people, a lot of the other executives would have loved to have had their hands on the Desilu money, and they had that in their sights. So they were not, you know, they were not innocent of their motives of approaching Lucy, which I write about in the book, of course.
Yes, there is a lot that people can cover when it comes to this wonderful story here. In fact, I was kind of surprised when I was reading in this. There was a point where there was even a thought about this. Robert Redford is very good, but believe me, he's just not going to make it.
Yeah. We laughed about that a lot, Redford and I and Lucy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. That was not one of her great predictions.
Now, one of the things when you were talking about connecting Lucy with who became eventually her husband was the physical specimen that this man was, and the way you write about that.
Well, he was tall, and he was very, you know, he was good looking. He had a fake rug, which she didn't even know about until later after their relationship. But Gary was a stand-up comedian and not a very good one. But he used to take some of my ex-husband Jack Carter's materials, you know, after Jack had used them, and Gary was, you know, he was. I don't know what to say about Gary except that at least he was a good husband to Lucy.
Yeah, I understand. So give us some insight about things that, maybe a couple of things you share in your book about Lucy that maybe people didn't know.
Well, we were very, very close. She liked having me around. She loved my sense of humor. She loved my attitude, and she just insisted on having me around all the time. And she was very, very, very defensive of me. She wouldn't allow anybody to disparage me in any way, not even Gary. She even exiled one of her friends from her life because he had said something derogatory, disparaging about me, meaning Lee Tannen, who wrote the book I Loved Lucy. She banned him from her life for many years until I finally prevailed upon her to maybe, you know, give him a break, you know, to come back into the fold again. But she wouldn't allow anybody to say anything bad about me. She was my protector. In fact, when I lost all my money, I went bankrupt because as a result of my third husband, unfortunately, I married the wrong man all the time. But he forced me into bankruptcy, and she took me into her guest house, and I lived with her for quite a while at the guest house. And then she had me move to New York with her when Gary and Lucy moved to New York to be closer to the kids, and also for the future production of Stone Pillow. So she made sure that I was always there around her. Lucy and I had such great fun. I would help her when, like, for instance, do girly things, like if her hairdresser couldn't show up to help her henna her hair, which is the henna is the red dye that she used. I would do it for her, and I would set her curls for her, and I would help her with her makeup, and I would decorate her houses, and I would, and she loved my decorating. So she eventually had me decorate the apartment in New York, which eventually got into Architectural Digest, got a big play there, and she even directed me into getting into decorating after my career in show business, because I had, after my bankruptcy, So she had supported me in so many ways, emotionally and as a girlfriend. She just had to have me around her all the time, even when she moved to New York.
Now, just recently, I had a wonderful segment that we did on the life of martial arts legend Bruce Lee. Now, I don't know if you knew him or came across.
I knew about him.
Oh, you knew about him.
Oh,
well,
sure.
Everybody did by then.
Yes.
But here's the interesting thing. You guys inadvertently sort of come together in a very weird way. Now, here's what it is. He actually briefly dated Sharon Tate.
Really?
Yes. Okay.
That's interesting.
And as a matter of fact, what most people didn't know, he was actually a suspect.
Really?
Now, you know where I'm going with this when I talk about this piece of property that you were looking at on Benedict Canyon.
Yes, right.
And this is one of those things that Lucy protected you from.
Right. She had a bad feeling about it. She and both Jack Carter. She said, oh, no, this is not the place. And I loved the place. And this is, of course, before all that happened. But she just had, she had an insight into things that were right for me, I guess. But that's very interesting. My goodness.
Now, we haven't really said why these two things are so interesting.
No. Why are they interesting?
Because why was that property, why did that give her an eerie feeling? What actually happened on that piece of property just a couple of years after you decided, or they turned you away from it?
I don't know.
That was the Charles Manson.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
I don't know. It's really, I never understood why she disliked it so much, because I really thought it was a beautiful piece of property. And I was buying a lot of properties before that, and I had a big hand in real estate in Beverly Hills for a long time, and she just absolutely didn't like it. Mm-hmm. She just had a feeling about it.
Yeah, and it was really eerie to read that, because as it was written in the book, is just a couple of years later, that's where the Charles Manson murders had occurred.
Yeah.
And Bruce Lee became a suspect in the murder of Sharon Tate.
My goodness, that's an interesting combination.
That's why I said that's a really weird kind of crossing of paths.
I'm glad you brought it to my mind, because that's fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Now, you also had a nice big circle of friends. Again, Don Rickles was one that comes in.
Oh, yeah, Don.
And to me, he was like my favorite comedian of the 1970s.
I love Don Rickles. And I knew Don Rickles from his very beginnings in Las Vegas. When I was going with Jack Carter, we would often see Don Rickles doing the lounge shows before he became famous, And then I knew his wife, and I knew his kids. And he was a sweet, darling man. He wasn't the cantankerous person that he came off as. He was really a darling, sweet person.
Now, there was a particular play I know that Lucille Ball had done when she was, I believe it was in New York, that it was kind of a gamble. She put her money into it, and at first it just wasn't working out so well. And someone we haven't really brought into the picture yet is, talking about Desi Arnaz, which was her ex-husband at the time when you came to know her. But she went to him for some advice about how to turn this whole thing around. Let's talk about what that play was specifically and what happened there that actually turned things around once she went to his counsel.
You mean Wildcat?
Yes.
Well, we were having the show was never really a good show. The music was wonderful. I knew Cy Coleman and I knew all the other people involved, and the music was wonderful. But the plot was just not really there, and the audience came to see. They came to see Lucy. They didn't come to see this strange Wildcat character. So she called Desi to come and help her and to play doctor, right? So he came and he said, look, put more Lucyisms in, add some Lucyisms, and she did, and the audience responded and they loved it. Of course, the producers and the director hated it, but she did what was right for the show. It was her money, after all, in the show, so she was going to do what Desi told her to do. Now, Desi always had a good idea of what was right for Lucy. So that was very smart of her to do that. That was even after they had broken up and they'd separated, But she relied on him for his opinion.
Now, what I did know about Desi Arnaz was what you'd shared in his book was about the kind of man that he actually was when it came to being outside of the lights, and that just wasn't all that appealing, was it?
No, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. He was really fall down drunk. Excuse my expression.
And
the cops would come and pour him on her front doorstep more times than you can imagine. And she got tired of it and his womanizing. And he slept with just about every female in Hollywood, according to Lucy.
Absolutely.
So anyway, so she had to leave it because she couldn't subject her children to that kind of a lifestyle. So that's why she moved to New York and she did the Wildcat project.
Now, how it was really fascinating because you eventually moved to California, correct?
Yes, I did. Okay. I moved back here.
And let's talk about some of the things that you and Lucy did together as you were seemingly a lot closer together there.
Well, we would go to parties together. I remember one occasion we went to Michael Douglas's father, what was his name? Kirk Douglas, and his wife gave a party for the Russian astronauts. And, of course, they gave this big party and all the celebrities were there, and nobody could speak Russian. And everybody, and of course the astronauts were like, kind of like in limbo, whatever. And I spoke a little bit of Russian phrases, and I thought I'd give it a try. So because years ago I had known Vladimir Horowitz, the famous pianist, and he had taught me some Russian phrases. So I thought, and I remembered them. So I went up to the Russian astronauts, and I would say some of the Russian phrases, and they perked up, and they were going all around. They were standing next to Lucy and me, and Lucy was pretending like she spoke a little Russian too. So we were going, and we were having a great time with that. And everybody at the party was wondering, Lucy speaking Russian? With the Russians. Of course, she wasn't. She was just kind of like mimicking me. But that was one of the fun things that happened.
And then the two of you actually sang together on the Ed Sullivan Show, right?
Yes, that's right. We did that while the show was running. That was fun. And I as a result of my vocalizing with her and getting her to sing and give up cigarettes during the run of the show, she was able to finally do the cast album, which I was very proud of for her because she was not a singer, but she managed to get those songs out on that recording.
Now, how much of your career would you say Lucy gave you good guidance for? I mean, it seemed like you were really handling things pretty well on your own, but it seemed like she was also a pretty good mentor as well.
Yes, she was. I mentioned it a couple of times in there, like the time that Jack Carter and I both were good friends with what's his name? Help me out. My memory goes a little bad on me. So doing a show on Broadway, with Sammy Davis, and she counseled me against doing that because she said the time wasn't right for it. And she loved Lucy. She loved him. She was very fond of him, but she didn't like the idea of me doing a show with him because she thought it would be detrimental to my career because the time wasn't right for it yet. And she was right, because the gal who finally did do the show was not very good, and she didn't get very good reviews. But say that show did fairly well, but without me.
Now, Richard Burton, tell me about him.
Oh, well, I wrote about that. How do I go into that without taking up another hour and a half of your
Exactly.
time? So that's a funny story, and that's one of my favorite stories. But I think it's more fun to read about than for me to tell about it.
Absolutely. Well, I remember there was a time that Lucy was excited as you were working on the set of Dinah East, and she wanted you to show up on the Here's Lucy show because she was going to introduce you to your old boyfriend, as she said.
Well, that was a show where she did it with. He was there with Liz Taylor when she put on the like big gorgeous ring, and then she couldn't get it off her finger.
Something like, what was it, 60 carats or something like that?
That was. She made a whole show about it. It was fun, and I saw Richard at that time, and of course he kind of winked at me, but we didn't interface very much after that.
Now, when it comes to Lucy, again, we were talking about public perception that she pretty much was what you seen on stage, and people really connected and loved that about her. As you had put this book out there, what kind of reaction did you get from people who were fans of Lucy when it came to going out and sharing this story?
Well, I've had wonderful responses from all over the world. People have commented and sent me the book for me to sign and send back to them. So most of the response has been very, very good. And most people really enjoy the book because they feel it's an intimate look at Lucy. In fact, if you saw what Rex Reed recounted, in his review, he said that I write from the heart without pretentiousness and without guile. The result is that legions of fans will now love Lucy even more. So I've gotten very good response from it. I don't think I'm going to be a millionaire from this book.
Well, I could see why you'd get great responses, because I remember there was even, and I kind of quote this, I was just trying to get Lucy laid.
Oh.
I read that and I'm like, boy, here's an unabashed account of what's going on here.
That's one of the famous lines that I get the most. But it's the truth. Listen, I'm a woman,
Absolutely.
I was a young woman at the time, and I understood what a woman needed.
That's absolutely right. Lucy definitely needed some love.
She probably had been laid for years from Desi. It's about time.
Crazy stuff. Now, you got into real estate, and that seemed pretty intriguing as well with some of the people that you had worked with. And again, as I was opening up the show, talking about that a little bit, what got you to move into that direction?
What made me move in that direction?
Yeah.
Well, when I divorced Jack Carter, he prevailed upon the judge that I was such a big star on my own that I didn't need any money from him, and that he didn't have to pay me for my, for child support or anything else. And I was stuck with this huge house that I lived in Beverly Hills with my son. I was leaving Jack Carter, and I didn't have the means to pay the mortgage. So a real estate agent came along and said, well, listen, I could rent this place out for you to stars, and you could make a lot of money. I said, oh, great, but where am I going to live? And it so happened that the judge had awarded me $20,000. Can you believe that?
Now,
so I took the $20,000 and bought a little house up in Coldwater Canyon, and that house today is worth maybe about $3-4 million.
I know, that was a kind of a funny story. If it's the same one where you went into court and he was absolutely out to get you, and he decided or didn't know that you were going to show up dressed and looking the way that you did. Was that the one where?
No. That was
okay.
That was a third husband.
Okay.
That was the one that put me in bankruptcy. Who tried to steal my I had this gorgeous big 3-acre place in Palm Springs, close to where Lucy was, and he was trying to get it away from me, and he was trying to get all kinds of things away from me. He was a real snark. Oh, God.
I just remember reading about how you went into court and you were looking rather haggardly.
I looked like a little old lady.
Talk about that a little bit, because the way he came into court, not expecting you to look the way you did, the way that all played out.
Yeah, well, I came in looking like with a gray wig on and my stockings rolled down to my ankles with a funny little old dress that I robbed from my mother. And he said, and I said, Your Honor, he's stolen everything from me. Now he wants my Mercedes. And he stood up and he said, That's not my wife. My wife is a beautiful young woman. And the judge said, Of course she is.
Now, when we
the
get
judge was
to
convinced that I was an old lady.
Now, Lucille Ball also liked collecting wines, but there happened to be a fire when it came to that, wasn't there?
What?
Wasn't there a fire and she had a wine cellar?
Oh, Lucy had a wine cellar. It wasn't a wine cellar. It was a place that she kept the wines underneath the staircase.
Right.
And there was an area there where, and of course, you don't keep wines, good red wines, in anything except a temperature-controlled area. Well, those wines were all gifts from people. Lucy wasn't a wine drinker. She liked. What was it she liked? I'll think of that in a minute. But all those wines were rotten. They were cooked to death.
Right. Because I remember as I was reading that, and it just came to mind now. I don't know why I thought about that, but then all of a sudden, Fess Parker's name
that is
comes
one of
up.
the funny stories here.
And it was funny, like, Daniel Boone, really? Here I'm picturing this guy with that coonskin hat. I remember watching that as I was growing up as a kid. I was thinking, I didn't realize he was a wine connoisseur. And that's what's so amazing about what you write about, is these things that you don't know about these people, that are kind of behind the scenes and very unique. And I think when people come to read your book, Lucy Loved Me, you'll get to see a very real human story unfolding here, that's who these people are. So basically what you see on screen or on stage is what you sort of get in a way, in real life. And so you get to understand how all this works.
Yeah. Anyway, my life with Lucy was very, very, lots of fun, and we had lots of very intimate stories. And there are a lot of which I recount in the book, and I'm sure that anybody reading it will identify with my position in it. They'll feel, I think I'll let the reader feel, how I felt about my relationship with Lucy and how attached she was to me. And there's no other word to say except that she had to have loved me, because she was so protective of me. She basically worried about me all the time and just had me, had my good wishes always, in her mind. So I'm very, very, grateful to have been part of her life and her being part of mine, because it was certainly a rare one.
Well, there's no doubt that as you embark on a dream for yourself, that you don't realize until you look back at the wake that your boat has created, just what a wonderful life you've created for yourself, and you can never know what it's going to bring to you.
That's true.
And it's fascinating. I was just recently talking with Marion Ross, who people know as Mrs. C from Happy Days. And she said the very same thing. She said, I put my head down because my dream was just to be an actress. And it wasn't until she was about 53 years old that she even landed that role as Marion Cunningham on Happy Days. And she says, but I look at the relationships that I've had and the fact that this dream drove me in directions, that I wanted to pursue, but I would have never expected the kind of things that came into my life versus the way that I expected it to turn out. Would you kind of say that was the same thing for you?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say to our listeners about dreams?
About what?
About dreams, about pursuing their dreams.
Well, you have to have dreams. You have to have aspirations. And I think that that's the most important part of, being successful, is having aspirations and dreams and pursuing them. and making a reality of those dreams is very important.
And even more importantly, that you stay healthy by good eating. And I know that on your website, paulastewart.com, you help people do that with Paula's Kitchen. Couldn't help myself.
You're joking, of course. Well, I do try to eat well. And listen, I'm going to be 90 next year. I can't believe it.
Congratulations.
And, I'm still healthy. I do Pilates twice a week. I, walk, and I do, run a little bit. And I try to stay healthy. I think that's the most important thing because that keeps your mind healthy.
Absolutely. Well, Paula, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Oh, well, thank you for your wonderful, inspiring questions. I just love talking to you. Anytime you want to talk again, feel free to give me a call.
Oh, absolutely. And again, your website is paulastewart.com. You can find out how you can go about getting the book Lucy Loved Me and find out a lot of the stories. I mean, there's so much you could share this book. Again, it's a long show if we decided to do that. But I'd rather leave that for our guests to also enjoy as well. Paula, thank you so much for being on the program today.
And likewise. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter to keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50, as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.